The real INFJ explained. I'm going to start right off by telling you that this isn't going to be a video that glorifies the rare, mystical, mysterious, Jesus-like guru that most people think the INFJ are. That description, I think, is a reason why so many people want to be the INFJ. They want to be unique or rare. INFJs have this intrigue about them that others can't quite put their finger on, but let me tell you, the real INFJ usually wants to be any other type besides the INFJ, at least until they get much older. Rather than starting at the top of the stack with NI Hero, I'm going to go right to the chaos of an INFJ, the FI critic. INFJs are one of the most judgmental people out there, and from birth, we arrogantly and ignorantly think we know what is good and bad and right and wrong, and this places such an enormous expectation of idealistic perfectionism upon us and others that it creates burdens, isolation, lack of value, and feelings of worthlessness for ourselves because no one can live up to the impossible standards inside our head. Our critic function is constantly telling us, that's right, that's wrong, that's not perfect, that looks weird, that's immoral, that's not good enough, that could be better, that's not important, that's important, that isn't as important, that's more important, that doesn't matter, this matters, but this matters more, that's not fair, that's not right, that's not okay, I like that, I don't like that, I hate this, I love that, that's ugly, that's beautiful, and on and on and on. However, we are rarely saying these things out loud. It's like a constant nag in the back of my head telling me with every breath I take what I'm doing wrong and how I'm not good enough. And on rare occasions, it tells me how awesome I am and can give me such an ego boost that it goes to the extreme opposite end of me thinking I'm fucking Jesus. Most of the time, these thoughts are directed inward at ourselves, even though we see these shortcomings in others as well. When INFJs do verbalize our negative judgments towards others, we are usually tired, irritable, or challenging your morals and values. When we make a mistake or get criticized by others, especially those we care about, the critic function attacks us even harder, and we close ourselves off from others, hide in our rooms and cry, and try everything we can possibly do to be perfect and not make a mistake because of this critic function attacking. My mom, God bless her, always thought she was being helpful anytime she would come over and tell me how I should do something differently. And it would send me in a downward spiral that usually ended in a screaming rage of fit where I slammed my bedroom door shut. It is the chaos of the critic function that requires the child to learn coping mechanisms to handle these downward spirals. Many INFJs become Enneagram 1, which is the reformer and perfectionist who shows their chaos through SE, anger, and rage. This would be my type. But INFJs can be any Enneagram and will show their coping mechanisms in different fashions, not just the example I have provided here. This will be related to their Enneagram. I'm in the anger triad, but there is also fear and shame-based coping mechanisms. As we get older and start to incorporate our FE parent, we learn how to create order out of this chaos caused by the critic function. The FE parent mirrors those around us, It takes in other people's value systems and we adjust our behavior to the group. This softening or blending of our values to accommodate and validate others maintains harmony within the group, as well as quiets the voice of the critic inside our head. However, oftentimes the INFJ will overcompensate with FE parent and start mirroring poor behaviors to fit in with a group, or are taken advantage of by others through manipulating an INFJ with guilt. INFJs can think they need to take care of others to an extreme level that we sacrifice our own well-being to do so, or think we are only worthy or valued if we are taking care of someone else. This mindset can result in toxic relationships, being used by others, and codependencies. An overactive FE parent can also result in the INFJ losing themselves and their identity by becoming so much like those around them that they forget who they truly are, or they only allow certain parts of themselves to be seen by different groups of people. This fragmented self is hiding parts of ourselves from the group to not be rejected and keep the peace. INFJs often feel extremely uncomfortable when they have all their different groups of friends come together because they don't know which parts to show since they rarely show their whole self to anyone. I have only just started to reveal parts of myself I haven't shown anyone after nearly 4 decades. When the INFJ has experienced enough pain and suffering and learning from their mistakes, and to some extent experienced their dark side by going along with other people's terrible behavior, the INFJ can refine their morals to a standard that is realistic, practical, and achievable by any good human being. The INFJ also learns that they do not have to do anything to be of value or worthy of someone else's love, nor should they need to sacrifice their health and well-being for someone to love them back. We all possess intrinsic value, and love is to be shared freely without conditions or expectations. Love is not earned, it is given. This is when the critic becomes the wise man. The INFJ has transformed the arrogance and self-righteousness into wisdom and humility. It recognizes that we are all human and we all make mistakes. The INFJ will even begin to marvel and love the imperfections rather than perfection. And the FE parent takes on the role of being responsible and knows when to validate and accommodate and when enough is enough, when too much kindness ends up hurting rather than helping. This balance between FE and FI creates a healthy INFJ who recognizes their value and worth and experiences love for self to maintain healthy boundaries as well as appreciating other people's differences and values to experience a world of love and harmony. The mystical prophet of the INFJ comes from our hero function, introverted intuition. However, once you understand this function, you realize it isn't that mystical after all. Introverted intuition, NI, is a function that relies on all the other functions at the same time. This is our Zen-like state where we enter a mental flow of utilizing our entire brain to solve a puzzle. The world is nothing but patterns within patterns within patterns. Even the outliers form their own pattern. Those that think they are unpredictable and spontaneous are predictable in their unpredictability. Even those that think they are unique and one of a kind are sadly one of many who share the same quirks as others. That may be a downer for those that want to be a one of a kind, and you are. No one will be exactly like you. But in terms of NI, everyone is part of a cluster or several clusters really, and the gist of the cluster of people are all the same. The details may be very different, but the general overall concept, the big picture, the underlying meaning, the root cause, the why, is the same to NI. For example, there are what seems like 1,000,000 Marvel movies out now, and each one is different in the details, but they all share the same general storyline. There is a hero, there is a villain. The hero must overcome some obstacle while the villain tries to destroy the world. The hero overcomes the obstacle and ends up defeating the villain, and the world is saved. To me, I am so fucking bored out of my mind from all the Marvel movies. I have stopped watching movies pretty much altogether because to me it's like I'm watching the same damn movie over and over and over again. I like movies that don't follow this classic storyline and mix it up. It's one reason I liked M. Night Shyamalan's movies in the beginning. But then he too started forming patterns with his movies having weird twists, so then I was predicting the twist. NI uses our experiences, what we see, what we hear, what we read, what we feel, what others think, what others do, and it pulls in all this information without actively trying, and it puts it into clusters, and it forms patterns. This is better known as statistical learning in perception with convergent thinking. I discuss more about what that is in my extroverted intuition and introverted intuition explained video linked above. But in a nutshell, statistical learning extracts what is common across multiple experiences, leading to more generalized knowledge that affords predictions about new situations. Statistical learning refers to an unconscious or passive cognitive process in which repeated patterns or regularities are extracted from sensory environment. With these patterns, INFJs then take that and team up with our introverted thinking function and start our NITI loop, where each pattern is turned into a puzzle. And when the last piece of the puzzle is put into place, we get this aha moment where everything makes sense. And we just know the conclusion because every piece points to a bullseye on the target, and it's like a light bulb going off. Thus, from all the puzzles we have already solved, which creates its own patterns within that pattern, we are able to predict the future before the newly forming puzzle is even complete. And that is how we become prophets. Forecasting is a more accurate term for our ability to see the future. Basically, our NI doesn't always hit bullseye when we are forecasting, but we almost always are at least hitting the target. As we get more information and we get closer in time to that future, we are continuously narrowing our forecast down to hit the bullseye before it happens. Just like how we forecast the weather and adjust it as we get closer and closer to real time. That is the hero function, the go-to guy for the INFJ. The difference is the weather guy is using a bunch of technology and graphs and historical data, and the INFJ is using everything they have gathered from their SE inferior function. That's right, introverted intuition is 100% dependent upon extroverted sensing. Now, sometimes the INFJ misses the target altogether or doesn't have enough information to narrow things down to a single target and has several targets to shoot at but doesn't know which one is correct. And that brings in the any nemesis. When our predictions are wrong and the hero is taken down by an alternative possibility which we had either dismissed or didn't think of, and when someone or something breaks pattern and now we don't know what to expect, it can create worries and sometimes paranoia in the INFJ. When our predictions are wrong, It is usually because the NI hero got a little too cocky and stopped thinking about other possibilities, or came to a definitive conclusion without enough information. This is the INFJ imbalanced between their NI and NE axis and their NI and SE axis, respectively. The NI is being overused. Sometimes we don't know we are missing information and are ignorant rather than arrogant. This form of taking down the hero can be a bit of a bruise to the ego. We can start to doubt ourselves and worry we are missing a piece of the puzzle, and then start thinking about negative possibilities. If you watched my story and why I created this channel video and made it pretty far in, you would know that I've seen a man who could change his face the way that other men change their clothes. After that experience, I had serious PTSD paranoia and couldn't even trust if the person I was talking to was really who I thought it was, because now I know that some people can change their faces to look like someone else. That was not something I would have been able to come up with as a realistic possibility before that event, and thus I was ignorant of this phenomena and never would have predicted that for the future. When we are in this negative state of the shadow, we can also start to think that people have bad intentions towards us, and think they are starting to gang up on us or are about to flip the script on us and become our enemy rather than our friend. Sadly, this negative thinking can be a self-fulfilling prophecy because we start questioning our friends and distancing ourselves to try and protect ourselves from others, and that doesn't usually go over very well. Now, sometimes that negative intuition is correct, and it's not just in our head. When people break patterns, depending on our mental state at the time and the actual change in pattern, this can lead to negative thinking as well. For example, when someone regularly gets home at a certain time and they didn't call and they didn't show, you can start to worry and think the negative, like they were in a car accident. Or let's say you started dating someone and they were always quick to respond and then suddenly didn't respond for a couple days. This could create worries of them no longer being interested in you, even if all that has happened was them being busy and simply failed to inform you. So for my non-INFJs, to avoid being on the receiving end of the INFJ experiencing any nemesis, paranoia, clinginess, be proactive and communicate when you will be late or can't respond quickly, or when you have to break your pattern. Or best option is to simply set a pattern that is more accurate to your usual behavior, rather than setting a precedent that can't be sustained for a long duration. For example, in the beginning of relationships, things tend to be very hot and heavy, and you spend a bunch of time together. And then it sort of fizzles out and you spend less time together as you go back to doing more of what you used to do. Rather than doing that, maintain your lifestyle while slowly incorporating the INFJ into your life a little at a time. This sets a proper precedence of your normal behavior and routines, and you don't experience the serious burnout after seeing each other too much on the front end. This allows for the relationship to build and grow and set a solid foundation for things to get better with time rather than worse. When introverted intuition and extroverted intuition are balanced and both are being used, NE becomes an ally for the NI hero, and the INFJ can come up with creative solutions, alternative positive possibilities, and brainstorm new ideas that they can bring into fruition. INFJs are not idle thinkers. They want to bring these ideas into reality. However, INFJs are finishers, which means we can struggle to get started and suffer from failure to launch syndrome that prevents us from taking action. But once we do get off our ass and out of our head, don't get in our way, because we become like a juggernaut that takes down all the obstacles in its path to reach our goal. Failure to launch is due to a couple reasons. One reason is simply feeling unmotivated. This could be basic depression from the negative FI critic telling us we are shit and I'll never be good enough, so we don't even bother. Another would be that what needs to get done isn't appealing, so the desire or impulse to start isn't there. Another reason would be that we are caught between two choices and aren't sure which one will have a better or worse outcome on our future, thus leaving us at an impasse. Another reason is INFJs are enjoying their reverie inside their head and aren't quite ready to come back down to reality. And sometimes we are creating our master plans inside our head. We may look like we aren't doing anything, but boy is our mind working hard. However, when our brain starts working too hard and gets trapped in an NITI loop, it actually means we need to break out of our head and go SE around by taking in some new information, exert some physical energy, or simply start on the project or task to realize what piece was missing to close the loop and find the conclusion we were seeking. If we keep ourselves trapped in a loop for too long, it will result in an SE grip state, and we will break out of our head in a very unhealthy manner, stressed and frustrated and wanting to do anything except think or feel. We will binge on sensory stuff, drinking, eating, watching TV, going out, having sex, working out, cleaning, not sleeping. We will do and do and do to an excess to relieve the pressure that was built up inside our brain because we got stuck in a loop for too long. For a healthy release, INFJs should go for walks or do yoga daily, and when they start to feel their wheels spinning and before they hit the bottom of a downward spiral, they should take a small break and do some sort of physical activity. This usually makes space for our brain to know where to look for information that is needed to solve the puzzle and close the NITI loop we had been stuck on. Contrary to popular belief, having SE inferior does not mean we are uncoordinated or are unaware of our surroundings. Inferior functions are usually exceptional at the function, but it comes off as awkward or in doubt because of the insecurity and fears the person is experiencing inside. INFJs don't want to look stupid. When an INFJ is experiencing insecurity and fear in their SE inferior function, it looks more like stage fright, nervousness, or meekness. The classic INFJ whisper. We notice all those details people think we don't notice. SI demon doesn't mean we aren't aware of the details in the moment. It means we don't take away the details and store them in our memory that can be easily accessed later. This is because of the conflicting information trying to be stored in the hippocampus. Statistical learning, or NI, prevents episodic and semantic memory from being stored. This means we tend to forget the details, but we see them in the moment. Once again, I discuss why this is the case in my video Extroverted Intuition and Introverted Intuition Explained video, where I go over a research article that explains why statistical prediction of the future impairs episodic encoding of the present. Linked above for your convenience. My job as a tax accountant is very detail-oriented. I am sometimes searching for a penny or a decimal or a number being transposed. We are very aware of reality and the details when we are not inside our head. SE is mandatory for NI to be able to build its patterns. Without external stimuli and information, whether that's through reading books, listening to podcasts, conversations with others, or hands-on experience, NI won't have anything to work with to see the big picture and realize the meaning of life and recognize people's potential. To overcome the stage fright of SE inferior requires the INFJ to practice doing. We need to willingly use our sensing access. This is our SE inferior and SI demon. Repetitively doing builds the skills and habits and conditions ourselves through muscle memory to be good at what we are insecure about. This is how INFJs develop their SI demon. We build our implicit, non-declarative memory rather than our explicit declarative memory. This reduces the fear of failure. This reduces the failure to launch syndrome, and it provides historical data to recall good experiences of when the INFJ took action. And even if it didn't go as well as hoped, you survived, and you can learn from that experience and improve for the next go around. The INFJ is so aware of mistakes, mishaps, and flaws in others and in ourselves that they think everyone cares about their performance as much as the INFJ does. Most people don't care if you mess up or aren't perfect. Many won't even notice unless you point it out. The best thing an INFJ can do when preparing for public speaking or a performance or taking action or even just starting a conversation with a stranger is to remember that no one actually cares how well you perform. They just want to see you perform. The haters that want to hate on a mishap do that because of their own damn insecurities. So don't listen to the haters. When you can start doing and facing the fears and learning to aspire through your SE function, the INFJ will find their true happiness and their soul. Basically, get over yourself and be humble, because people aren't thinking about you the way that you're thinking about you. Nobody cares. Here's an example of SE inferior aspiring right before your eyes.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent. How are you?
A little bit nervous.
That's okay to be nervous. That's totally understandable. What's your name?
Courtney.
And how old are you?
13.
13. What's your favourite subject in school?
Music.
What kind of music?
I don't know.
You're very sweet. And I'm guessing you're going to be singing for us?
Yeah.
Listen, don't be nervous. I know this is a big stage and there's lots of people here, but you're here for a reason, so go for it and good luck.
Thank you.
Bloody hell, Courtney. Howie, what did you think?
Oh my God. You are not from this era. You're from a whole different era.
Yes.
And I'm a huge Janis Joplin fan. And there's a story, if you ever watch the documentary, Clive Davis, he goes to the Monterey Pop Festival and he sees this young girl that nobody has ever seen before, that nobody knows. It was the first time Janis Joplin got signed. And that changed her life. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
I'm not Clive Davis. I'm Howie Mandel, and I can't sign you to a record deal. The only thing I can do for you, young lady, is give you...
My lovely INFJs, your inner critic is your own worst enemy. Tell that cunt to shut up and face your fears and just go do it because you are worth it. Moving on to introverted sensing. Most INFJs' memory is either the general overall concept or context that repeats through similar occurrences, statistical learning, which is our NI, or it is implicit memory, unconscious or automatic recall through our SI. Implicit memory includes procedural skills and habits, muscle memory, respondent or classical conditioning, non-associative learning or habituation, and priming. Implicit memory is also linked to our senses and emotions, which leaves an impression or imprints on the brain associated with a totem. When that totem is observed, felt, heard, tasted, or smelled, it triggers a particular memory. For example, when a song comes on the radio and you suddenly recall your first date where this song was playing 20 years ago, is an example of an implicit memory that was triggered by a totem. In this case, the totem was a song that you heard that links you to another memory where the same song was playing. The reason INFJs can recall with great detail all the horrible, terrible things someone has done to us in the past during an argument is because all the memories are triggered by the same emotion that we are feeling at that very moment. So every time you hurt us, all the previous memories of you making us feel this same pain are automatically recalled all at once. If the number of events gets to be too burdensome, that we are constantly being triggered with horrible flashbacks and basically reliving traumatic experiences over and over on a regular basis, which can look very much like PTSD, you will eventually experience the INFJ door slam. Now, people overuse the phrase door slam, so first I'm going to tell you what it is not. Ghosting. Deciding to no longer respond to somebody because you lost interest or don't want to engage with another person is not a door slam. Although it isn't the most adult way to handle a situation, it is simply a decision to move on with your life without informing the other party involved. I think it is incredibly rude and immature, but it is not a door slam. A true door slam is a rare occasion that requires an INFJ to hit their superego in a demonic fight or flight state that permanently removes the threat from their life. This could include physically removing or destroying any and all items that trigger memories, such as photos and gifts and the person. It means screaming everything wrong that the person has ever done in a fit of rage and removing permanently that person from your life, where they will know without a shadow of a doubt they are not welcomed back. That is an INFJ door slam. INFJs are not known for their self-preservation skills. This is the Jesus aspect of the INFJ, where we are willing to die and self-sacrifice for someone else. Where others would walk away, INFJs tend to try and stick it out and forgive because we know there is good in that person and can see their potential. Everyone needs grace and forgiveness. However, the superego has its own opinion on the matter and sees the truth. It is the INFJ's ejection button from an inevitable catastrophic crash. It is what protects us when we can't protect ourselves. Take a long, hard look at yourself if you find yourself on the receiving end of an INFJ door slam. And INFJs, it is okay to set boundaries and say no. In fact, it is important to set boundaries, so you won't even need the superego to come in and protect you from an abuser, user, and manipulator. In order for an INFJ to encode explicit, semantic, and episodic memory, it requires the hero to be pulled from the game and sit on the bench and let their SI demon sub in, which can feel very off-putting and like we are having to work with the devil. This is why INFJs can hate having to keep track of the details and why their active recall of memory of past events is terrible. However, once they learn to use their SI demon function willingly, then INFJs can experience introverted sensing in its angelic state. INFJs tend to have very good visual processing and visual memory, which is related to SE, meaning rather than recalling the details of the step-by-step directions, we recall a visual image of the page with the directions, and then we can see the steps rather than recall the details themselves. So rather than telling an INFJ directions on how to do something, because we will probably forget them before we get to it, show them what to do. We are visual learners. This is a result of our FE-SE dynamic duo, and it is how most INFJs learn best. So lead by example and do as you say. If you want us to work out every day, you should work out every day. If you want us to go to bed at a reasonable hour, you should go to bed at a reasonable hour. If you do your routine, we will follow along. Continue doing your routine, and it will create a habit in us. Because of our mirroring aspect, we pick up habits and routines in our surroundings. If our significant other has really healthy habits and a consistent sleeping pattern, the INFJ will develop a routine that follows their healthy habits and adjusts to their sleeping patterns. However, this can also be a terrible thing if our partner has horrible habits. Although, if the routine gets broken, such as going on a vacation, or there are distractions or unexpected interruptions, getting back into a routine can be quite difficult for an INFJ. It's like we have to start all over again to form that habit or routine. Unlike high SI users, the habit is only temporary unless the INFJ willingly chooses to continue with the habit, which is not always the case once that person is no longer around to reinforce it. To put it another way, the grooves made when going over the same area out of habit are not that deep for an INFJ. We can fall out of routines quite easily, but are at our best when we have a balance between flexibility and structure. This is where we are balanced with our SE and SI functions. Forcing an INFJ against their will to adopt a structure or routine does one of two things. It either kills the INFJ's spirit, where they become a shell of themselves, or you will become acquainted with our SE rage. This is why you should always ask an INFJ if they will do something rather than commanding them to do anything. As an INFJ matures and is able to balance their functions, the ability of someone else having such an effect of killing their spirit or causing rage in the INFJ diminishes or becomes non-existent as they become tempered. Requiring an INFJ to follow an authority figure's commands simply because they are the authority figure is not the best way to raise, teach, or guide an INFJ, or anyone for that matter. INFJs don't see authority figures as above us. TE Trickster doesn't give a damn about authority or credentials, and as a child, we are completely unaware of someone's authority. We see everyone as equal. This is why I will speak to my boss the same way I will speak to a subordinate. Treat others as you want to be treated was a natural rule I understood without having to hear it from Jesus. It was there from the onset. I never understood why parents would say things such as, "because I said so," when their child is simply asking why. It only teaches kids to not think for themselves. It teaches them to not question and not think critically. It teaches them to be a mindless slave. It doesn't teach them to respect those in charge. It teaches them to fear those in charge, because if you don't do as they say, you get punished. It's a form of respondent classical conditioning. It teaches you to fear those in charge. Asking why is our TI child needing to know so it can make sense to us, and we don't get trapped in a cognitive loop. As a kid, this can be quite distressing, where we need to know why to avoid the trap of the NITI loop, but we will get punished if we don't do as our parents say. This is a double bind position where the TE trickster causes great distress for the INFJ. And as an adult, I ask why to make sure I'm doing something I agree with. Blindly following someone's commands, or only being provided information on a need-to-know basis, only makes me think that there is some sort of funny business going on and they want me in the dark. You should be able to explain why for everything you are asking me to do. If I do not understand why I'm doing something, then you are asking me to be a sheep. And I have no idea if you are hurting me to get my wool sheared or for me to be slaughtered for lamb chops. I have no desire to be a sheep. Parents, teachers, authority, stop conditioning children to be sheep. Parents, teachers, and authority, if you don't know why yourself, you are also a sheep, and it's time for you to wake up and understand. Otherwise, you are just the blind leading the blind. Teach them to honor their father and mother, not fear them. Inductive reasoning, an aspect of TE, can be quite distressing for an INFJ. We rely so heavily on deductive reasoning, an aspect of TI, that inductive is never really used. We don't place any value on it. And when we do try to do inductive reasoning, it is difficult for us to find the true conclusion. It leaves us confused, distressed, and anxious. When I'm forced to use this function, it is usually quite overwhelming and I come away from it without a real answer. I'm usually more confused than when I went in. However, once an INFJ has learned to master this function, defeating the trickster, INFJs have the highest capability of knowing the absolute truth with their ISTJ superego in its angelic state. TI child can be seen by others as naive and innocent or childish in their logic. We tend to say things that others might not say. It makes me think of the show Kids Say the Darndest Things. The biggest problem I've noticed is that most people can't follow an NITI combo. Most people need you to provide the step-by-step logical proof or explanation for them to follow. And then they also want you to provide specific details rather than general concepts. This is a double whammy against the INFJ when they are trying to explain their logic. Most people think the INFJ is simply wrong, but more often than not, it is the other person who simply couldn't follow along, so they didn't get it and misunderstood and wrote the INFJ off as a moron. Think of it like this. In math, the teacher wants you to show your work on how you got to the answer. The INFJ does all the work inside their head and can simply go from the problem to the solution without needing to show any work. So those that can't do that need us to show the work so they can see how we got to our answer and realize that it is correct. They tend to push us to use TE and SI. This causes frustration and distress, and we get tongue-tied and angry and then look even more like a child who is just throwing a tantrum. But really, it was us being attacked by our TE trickster and SI demon because you were wanting us to show the evidentiary support, TE, with all the details, SI. Later, these people tend to realize the INFJ was correct. They were unable to see the connections, which makes it difficult for the INFJ to be taken seriously. We are often seen as a child and left out of grown-up discussions and decisions because our input isn't valued. As the INFJ gets older, their language to explain themselves and their evidence to support their claims expands, and more people start to see the intelligence that lies within our inner child. TI is a function that gets stronger as you accumulate more conceptual truths and expand your vocabulary. Once known and understood, it allows for better deductions and determining what is valid, increasing the INFJ's ability to confirm or invalidate accepted empirical truths, assisting us to reach our highest potential of knowing the absolute truth and mastering the TE trickster. Mastering your trickster function is the hardest and last function to fully develop. This doesn't mean the INFJ cannot be wrong. We can be wrong quite often. However, if we are wrong, it means we were missing information or had bad information. With all the information, whether it be good or bad intel, the INFJ will always find the correct solution to solve the problem and determine validity. Withholding information or intentionally providing us with bad information is how you mind fuck an INFJ. It is the easiest way to psychologically torture us. And now that you know this, purposefully withholding information and or lying is very manipulative and makes you the bad guy. The need-to-know basis and separation of duties where the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing has nothing to do with safety and protocols or fraud and corruption prevention as they love to tell everyone. It is all about information control to maintain the upper hand. If everyone had all the information, then there would be no place to hide all the scandals and corruption going on behind the scenes. They want you in the dark to control you and protect themselves. And that is the INFJ explained. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it.